The next 24 hours, in fact, the next 72 hours probably, will be very significant to know whether the National Party will be backing in the inevitability of death, taxes, net zero 2050. It seems like those who run the world have told us it's going to happen. They're all going to sign up to it. But of course, the signing up to it part is not a physical signing up to it. It's not a passing of legislation. It is an overall commitment on the horizon. One that, if you are a climate catastrophist, is not enough, hence why they're going to keep turning up the heat, pun intended, about the targets for 2030. But remember, the Labor Party doesn't have a 2030 target. Only the federal government has that target. And the Nationals have apparently handed a list of concerns/demands to the Prime Minister. Now, the reporting about this is a little bit vague. There is no suggestion of this much money will equal support or back in this process or back in that process. And apparently, some of the demands are a little vague, which gives the capacity for Barnaby Joyce to negotiate something that could be just as binding as net zero 2050 if you don't pass it through legislation. So we'll wait, watch and see. For her part, Bridget McKenzie is not backing down. She said this is not about money and the list of demands are not about billions.
I think it will be ugly. I think it will be ugly. I do agree. I agree with Senator Canavan. You'll have to check with Barnaby if he doesn't.
Now, interestingly here, the activists in this country, just a little bit like, remember when they gave you that misleading data that Australia was dead last when it came to vaccine rollout, but the actual fact was there was about 50 countries worse? This is when we were at the very start of vaccine rollout. Well, this is the type of fear porn that is running all over the shop to say not just net zero 2050, but something even more serious about 2030. They're already moving the goalpost before the game is even technically over. But of course, it's never over for them. Australia is running dead last among rich nations in the most important race, that of course being the matters to do with climate change. But I'd like to show you something that is not put together by a right-wing think tank. It has not been put together by the minds of Sky News prime time. It has not been put together by the right-wing factions of the Liberal Party. It's been put together by the United Nations. This is from a United Nations report this year into which countries put the most CO2 into the air. Geez, you see that pink one in the top right-hand corner? China. The rest of the world is grey. The United States is in blue. Then India, we're working basically in a clockwise fashion. Then Russia, and then every other little country that you can name, with Australia making up a grand 1%, along with the United Kingdom, Poland and the rest. That's the United Nations telling you that even if Australia went all in, China would be able to, as the IPA have told us, replace everything we do in just 16 days. So the government's position is the right position if you are going to subscribe to the inevitability of death, taxes and net zero 2050. Yes, it is a commitment on the horizon, but to pretend that we can do everything here and it will change the world when China can do whatever the hell it wants for another 10 years is, of course, bullshit. But the catastrophists run headlines like the one that you just saw today. Australia's running dead last. Yet the actual polluters around the world, as you have seen, China, the rest of the world, which is basically also counted as the developing world, the United States, which has not passed anything through its parliament, by the way, going anywhere near what Joe Biden has had to say about these targets, let alone Russia. Oh, and the Chinese won't be at Glasgow. The Russians will not be at Glasgow. So a big chunk of the world, about half, will agree to the never never of net zero 2050. Of those, many of those countries have backup power like nuclear power to be able to achieve what they set out to do in 30 years' time. As for Australia, sure, we'll have the target. But whatever is coming up at the next election is not about the next 30 years, it's about the next 3. And the next 3 is a lot closer to 2030 than it is to 2050. I repeat, the Labor Party has no target right now for 2030. Yet the screaming that you will see in the left-wing media, well, of course, it'll all be about whether or not the Liberal Party, the evil Liberal Party, has done enough. Greg Sheridan wrote a great piece today that you should have a look at, which was, thank goodness we didn't follow the path of those who said we should go all in 10, 15, 20 years ago. In terms of reducing emissions, our economy is 40% larger than it was in 2005. 2005 is the mark that they used to put in place both Kyoto and then Paris targets, but our emissions have gone down by 40%. So we're bigger, but producing less. And almost everyone agrees that we should reduce emissions and get cleaner technology. But this has to be done rationally, conscious of cost, which is exactly the federal government position.